Today's case that we're going to be discussing is the case of Oakley Carlson. Oakley Carlson is a missing little girl who has been missing for quite some time, but there have been a lot of new updates in her case, and to be quite honest, the circumstances surrounding her disappearance and some of the details that go into that are really upsetting, unnerving, and continue to be extremely mysterious, with most of the suspicion circling her biological parents. Now, we have seen this unfortunately time and time again, especially as of late it feels like, but more details are coming to light, more information is being revealed, but yet the question still on everybody's mind is what happened to Oakley? Where is she? Hey guys, I'm Elise. This is 10 to Life. Let's jump right in. We're officially 1 month into the new year, and I'm thinking, new year, new me. Actually, no, new year, same me, because I have been watching Magellan for years now. What's Magellan, you might be asking yourself? Well, let me just tell you. Magellan TV is the absolute hidden jewel of documentary streaming services. Magellan TV adds over 20 hours of new content weekly, so you will never run out of things to binge. And they have the largest and best collection of true crime shows anywhere, which is perfect for me and perfect for all of you 10 to lifers. Magellan TV is all about the drama of real life. Famous real-life cases, the lives of serial killers, the nature of the criminal mind, the detectives and the victims who will never rest until perpetrators are caught, and of course, the never-ending pursuit for justice. I just added to my queue How to Catch a Killer, which, come on true crime sleuths, I know that piques your interest, and y'all think you know how to catch a killer, but do you really? Watch and find out. Magellan TV is the best value of any premium documentary streaming service in both price and quality. 4K is always included in your subscription, and get this, there are no ads ever. Hallelujah! And because Magellan is so amazing, they are giving you a free month trial. All you have to do is go to the link in my description and bam, you're hooked up. You can thank me later. So go watch, enjoy, and tell me what other genres you watch, because I'm kind of thinking of tapping into some new ones, maybe space, since my 3-year-old keeps telling me that he wants to live on Jupiter. I don't know. We'll see. But seriously, tell me what's on your list to watch so I can add it to mine too. And don't forget, go and try Magellan today. Oakley Carlson was born on December 6, 2016, to parents Andrew Carlson and Jordan Bowers. Oakley is the second youngest out of 4 kids born to her mom and dad. Their family lived in Oakville, Washington, on land with over 300 acres and in an average 2-story white and green home. Now, Oakville is a small town of just under 800 people. It is like small. Oakley was also born into a very chaotic world, and by the time she was just a few months old, in mid-August of 2017, the state had taken custody of her. Nearby, there was a married couple named the Hiles. Jamie Jo, the wife, is a teacher and a drill team coach, and her husband Eric is an assistant lab tech. So 2 very professional people. After struggling with infertility and being married for 9 years, the Hiles decided to foster with the hopes to adopt. But initially, the Hiles kept putting off finishing their foster care paperwork. It was a lot of paperwork, and they were just kind of under the impression and feeling that they would have a kid when they had a kid, when the time was right. But when Jamie, who was just sitting on the couch relaxing one day, got a text from a former student saying that her hairdresser's grandchild needed a home, this felt like their moment. It was an instant yes. This placement would possibly be leading to adoption as well. However, the goal is always reunification, whenever it's possible and whenever safe. The Hiles rushed to finish the paperwork, and shortly after that, baby Oakley was placed in their home. That first night was both magical and very emotional. It was everything that they had dreamed of. Despite being separated from her siblings and her biological parents and everything she seemingly knew in her little life up until that point, Oakley adjusted very well in the Hiles' home. In their home, she was given love, structure, and a safe haven. She was really just your average happy-go-lucky baby and eventually grew, of course, into a toddler. She loved Mickey Mouse, Daniel Tiger, dance class, swim class, and just basically all the things a little girl loves. With her big brown eyes, her dark brown hair, and the funniest personality, she was adored everywhere she went. Meanwhile, Oakley's biological parents were dealing with addiction issues. These issues were leading to frequent arrests and the inability to be parental figures in their children's lives. They were set to have visits twice a week with their 3 kids, as they only had 3 at the time. Sometimes those visits would happen, and sometimes they wouldn't. A lot of it depended on whether or not they were in jail that week. Sometimes they would be late for the visits, so the visit would be canceled also. At one point, Jordan was in jail, and Andrew completely just stopped showing up for the visits altogether. The back and forth, complete with having a new driver every week to transport the children, was a lot on these kids. It's especially a lot on a toddler when they're in their very early formative years of development. When these visits would actually happen, it seemed like Oakley was having a good time seeing her siblings, but most times she would come home with something wrong. Whether that be that she had too much junk food and she was sick to her stomach, or she would come home wearing diapers that were just too small for her. And Jordan and Andrew also disliked the Hiles. They weren't happy that Oakley was in their care. A little bit of jealousy, resentment, and one would think that they would have tried to get to know the people caring for their daughter to say thank you at the very least, but that is not something that they ever did. Instead, they said that Jamie and Eric weren't taking good care of Oakley. Now, one time, Oakley had even gotten a diaper rash, and Jordan and Andrew blamed the Hiles for not taking care of her. But the whole reason that she had that diaper rash was because she had ate horrible food during her visitation time, and it really had a poor effect on her body. So things weren't seeming to get better with Jordan and Andrew either. So in July of 2018, Oakley's case plan was changed from reunification to adoption. At this point, the Hiles were over the moon because they were so in love with their daughter Oakley, and they of course planned on pursuing adoption. That same month, Andrew was arrested for assault 4 for attacking Jordan. Now, assault 4 in the state of Washington is a misdemeanor assault charge, and it can have a punishment of up to a year in jail or a fine of up to $5,000. The court ordered Andrew to obtain a domestic evaluation within 90 days of release and to enter and complete a treatment program for offenders. On March 6, 2019, Oakley went for one of her scheduled visits. She was returned to the Hiles in a Pampers diaper. Now, that would be fine, except for Oakley had very sensitive skin, and the Hiles had repeatedly asked her to only be put in Love's brand so that she wouldn't have a bad reaction. Then on March 7th, 2019, the very next day, Oakley went over to her second visit for the week. She came home this time with a diaper that had not been changed during the entire duration of that 2-hour visit. But even worse, she came home with scratches and red marks on her face. Jamie immediately asked the supervisor what happened, but the supervisor said she didn't know. Now, obviously, as her foster parents, they were very concerned. So Jamie documented immediately via email on this day. There was supposed to be a supervisor there for a reason. So on March 26th, a couple weeks later, Jamie sent a follow-up email to the same caseworker named Angela Fries at the Department of Children and Youth Families. The email contained the visit observation log and a photo of Oakley's face. Angela emailed Jamie back 2 days later, saying, and I quote, "I'm on vacation next week. We can schedule the health and safety for the first week I'm back. With visitation right now, I know that does not leave a lot of open days." So clearly Angela didn't seem to care very much. And there's 2 things that come to mind when reading this. Number 1, if the supervisor was actually supervising, shouldn't she have seen exactly what happened? And number 2, a child who is in foster care for their parents' inability to parent correctly comes back with scratches from a visit, and the future visitation dates aren't stopped until somebody figures out what happened. I know the system is overwhelmed, and I know that the social workers do not make all the calls. There is no doubt. But at that point, the system is willfully sending a child into a home where she may have already been injured by a parental figure under supervision. It is absolutely crazy that the photo and the documentation didn't seem to be taken seriously or really with any sense of urgency before those upcoming visits. So the visits continued, And in May of 2019, DCYF received a letter from the Domestic Treatment Program. The letter essentially said that Andrew had not gone to his classes since April 1st, and that he had failed to comply, so therefore he was being kicked out of the program. Documents were also filed in May by DCYF that included a full, detailed report of Jordan and Andrew. They were initially sealed, but later unsealed. There were two main things that were reported. The first one stated, Miss Bowers was recently ordered to undergo a UA, which is a urine analysis. Counsel only has an illegible copy of the results. Furthermore, the CPS report specifically noted a comment Miss Bowers made to her social worker, that she knew how to pass a urine analysis. In addition, there is no proof that Mr. Carlson is not using drugs in the presence of the children as he has done in the past, because counsel does not have the results of any UAs that Mr. Carlson may have submitted to. Now, the second thing stated, counsel received copies of letters dated June 24, 2020, written by DSHS from Miss Bowers, indicating that she and Mr. Carlson have completed court-ordered services. However, counsel has not received actual written documentation from the treatment agencies. In addition, the CPS report states that Miss Bowers received 2 domestic assessments. The first assessment recommended 1 year of domestic treatment. Thereafter, Miss Bowers apparently obtained a second domestic assessment that concluded no services were necessary. However, the CPS report states that Miss Bowers was not honest in her account of reporting domestic disputes. Counsel does not know if Miss Bowers ever participated in domestic counseling, and it is notable that CPS expressed concern about Miss Bowers and Mr. Carlson meeting the needs of one of their disabled children, specifically noting that they had failed to attend an appointment at Marybridge Hospital, although they had been given a gas card to attend. Now, those are all huge concerns that should have been taken very seriously. To me, all of that combined shows just how unfit these parents were and why their children needed to be separated from them. As a parent, your duty is to love your child, to guide your child, and to advocate for your child. So missing their disabled child's specialty doctor appointment when they were given the resources to make sure that they could get there truly proves their lack of care and concern. And Andrew not submitting any of the urine analysis like he had taken shows me that he likely either didn't take them at all or he refused to submit them because he knew that they weren't going to show him being drug-free. Now, all of this happening, which you would think would be more than enough proof and evidence that these children should not be in the custody of these parents. All of that was about to completely do a 180 and flip everybody on their heads. On December 30th of 2019, the Hiles were contacted by DCYF, and they let them know that Oakley would be returning to the care of her biological parents in early 2020. This was heartbreaking for the Hiles, not because they had been planning on adopting Oakley, but also because of the circumstances surrounding the reunification. The visits hadn't gone great, and the Hiles were genuinely concerned for Oakley's well-being. So because of this, they reached back out to DCYF and set up a meeting to go over all of these concerns. This meeting took place on October 11th, a few weeks later. So they had their meeting with Aberdeen DCYF, and they brought up the concerns, but they seemed to be completely dismissed. And they were directly told, she isn't your daughter. Well, obviously, she isn't their biological daughter, but let's just be real here for 1 second. They were all Oakley really ever knew in her short life, and they were her safe place. They were the ones who took care of her, who loved on her, who bought her presents, who kissed her boo-boos, who brushed her hair, and everything in between. They did everything for that little girl. They were more of parents to her than her biological parents were ever, in my opinion. Another concern that the Hiles had was the financial situation. With 2 people in the home who both didn't have jobs, 4 kids is very expensive. The Hiles were yet again just dismissed and said being poor isn't a reason for someone to not have their children. Which in general, this statement, yes, is correct. But in this case, these parents didn't have money because they seemingly refused to work. They enjoyed the government benefits and spent what they did have, the little amount of money they had, on drugs. Not to mention, it is also absolutely worth noting that Andrew used to be a police officer in Aberdeen, Washington. He was an officer from 2012 to 2017. And Aberdeen is in the same county as Oakville. where they resided. He was decommissioned in 2017 after making false and misleading statements. It is also said that him being a police officer is how Jordan and he initially met. Allegedly, there were a lot of domestic 911 calls between Jordan and her ex, and Andrew was one of the officers who often attended to these calls. Now, I have seen that part of the decommissioning involved his relationship with Jordan, but another thing that Jamie brought up in that meeting was about Oakley potentially developing an attachment disorder. Jamie was very concerned that ripping Oakley away so fast would be very damaging for her future. So Jamie Jo pleaded with DCYF to even just make the transition a little bit slower for her, but nobody on this case seemed to be concerned. By mid-October, Oakley began unsupervised visits with her parents, and this was in efforts to reunify her gradually. Just a week after Oakley's first unsupervised visit, she came home explaining things that she had seen take place inside the home, including physical assault. According to Oakley, Jordan had hit Andrew over a video Oakley was watching on a phone. In a video that Jamie took of Oakley talking to her and Eric, you can actually hear Oakley saying that Jordan hit Andrew really hard, and Oakley pretends that she is hitting somebody hard.
Look, time to take his phone from me.
Oh, and so...
and he took his phone from you?
Yeah.
Did you have Andrew's phone?
Yeah. I was watching Cocomelon.
Okay.
And Andrew took it.
And then
Okay.
what happened?
And Jordan put him back in his bed.
And then Jordan put Andrew back in his bed?
Yeah.
Oh.
Did she hit him, Oakley?
Yeah. Him dead, like, really hard, like,
Jordan.
Or why did she hit him?
Cause him was being mean.
Why was he being mean?
Like, whoa.
That should have been an immediate red flag. But yet again, DCYF brushed off that assault that Oakley claims to have seen and brushed it under the rug, saying that there were no concerns and that Oakley loved her mom and dad. Oakley was set to begin her first overnight visit with her biological parents in November of 2019. Now, by this point, her foster family was absolutely dreading this. They were fearful for her safety. They were fearful of her witnessing more domestic disputes, and they were also fearful that things were moving way too quickly. Jamie emailed Angela Fries, again, that social worker, and also Catherine Eddy, the supervisor. She emailed them to discuss these concerns on November 6th. The email back said that they were actually going to do the full reunification before January now, and it was actually going to be happening on November 29th, which was just a couple short weeks away. They were already worried that January was going to be too soon, too fast for Oakley. Now it's getting bumped up months. So they set that first overnight visit for November 9th. And after Oakley started these overnights, she started saying that she didn't want to go. One time she even said, "I was there for too long last time." Now that is not something normal to come out of a 3-year-old's mouth. A 3-year-old saying that should make everybody stop and ask what the heck is going on. On November 13th, Andrew's assault charges were dismissed, even after he didn't do that court-ordered program. Now, to me, that sent a clear message to him that he was exempt from the rules, because he should have gotten a harsher sentence for not doing the simple order that he was given regarding the program. Then on November 17th, after Jamie was clearly brushed off, Eric sent an email to Angela and Catherine to ask about what was going on and why they were reunifying Oakley so quickly, but neither one of them responded to his email. And personally, I think that maybe they knew that things weren't being handled in the right way and that they didn't want to take accountability. It's easier to pretend that something was never seen rather than own up to making a terrible call that could potentially harm a child. Now also, on top of all of this, as if that wasn't devastating enough, the Hiles were left with the task of telling their daughter Oakley, who they had come to know and love, that she wouldn't be living with them anymore. They had raised her, and she was their baby, and now she was being ripped away and placed back into the care of two parents who clearly were working the system over because winning was more important to them than the safety of their own biological children. This conversation was very emotional for everybody, including Oakley, who was adamant that she would only be going back to Jordan and Andrews for just the weekend. She didn't understand that it was permanent. Her whole little world was about to be flipped upside down within such a short span of time. By this point, Jordan and Andrew also had a new baby. There was initially discussion about that new baby that she was pregnant with going into the Hiles home to be with Oakley. But then DCYF said that Jordan and Andrew were actually doing well, so they never placed the baby at the Hiles home. So not only was Oakley going back to these biological parents, who, to be honest, she really didn't know very well at all anymore, but she was also gaining a sibling that she was going to be with 24/7. That is a huge change-up for a toddler. November 29th, 2019 was the day planned for Oakley to be removed from the Hiles home and placed back in the care of her biological parents, who had still not proven that they could remain stable. This was a week before Oakley's 3rd birthday. She also had only spent 6 nights unsupervised with her parents, which is absolutely insane to me. That morning, specifically the 2 hours leading up to the separation, was full of tears for everybody. Eric and Jamie knew they weren't going to see Oakley again unless she came back into foster care, and they potentially became her foster parents again. Jordan and Andrew were too self-absorbed and vindictive to let their child continue this positive relationship and connection that she had built. And the saddest thing is that when they were putting her in the car, she told them, "Grown-ups come back just like the Daniel Tiger song." That sweet baby was expecting to see them soon. She had no clue that she was going back into this house permanently. The only explanation the Hiles ended up getting was that Jordan appealed things in court after DCYF had made a mistake in the court. This mistake allowed the clock to be reset, as well as the dependency timeline, which allowed them to have a quicker turnaround to get their children back in their care. So essentially, social workers weren't doing their jobs, and that technicality is what ruined all of this. After Oakley left the Hiles house, they closed her bedroom door and didn't open it again for months. They were absolutely heartbroken and grieved the loss of Oakley as if it were a death. 6 months after reunification, in June of 2020, Oakley's case was closed. COVID was happening, so no one really knows how often they were being checked in on, but we do know that allegedly the social worker went over and brought a gift for their last visit in June of 2020. During this visit, Oakley sat on the stairs in a princess costume that she had received from the Hiles, and she was facing the wall and refused to interact with the social worker. After the social worker left, Jordan had a little celebration for herself that all of it was over and that the case was now closed. But Oakley not interacting shows me something was very clearly going on in that house. If you watch any videos or talk to anyone who knows her, they talk about her being bright and bubbly. So in my opinion, because she was a smart toddler who understood things, I feel as if maybe Jordan and Andrew maybe told her that if she said anything to the social worker, they would take her away from them. Even if she wanted to go back to the Hiles, though, which I can guarantee you she did, a little girl like that can't connect the dots of being taken from Jordan and Andrew, that would mean that she goes back to the Hiles, which her attachment to the Hiles had basically already been stripped before. So regardless what was going on in that home, she was probably subconsciously scared of that happening again. Not to mention, I also think it is a very big possibility that Andrew and Jordan had been bad-mouthing the Hiles, and that when Oakley was staying with them permanently, and when Oakley realized that, maybe they spun the story saying, "They didn't want you. You're a bad little girl. They gave you back to us. That's why, that's why you're so bad. Like, they didn't want you either," and like twisting it. I could 100% see them manipulating her that way. So things were pretty quiet over the next few months after the case closed. However, Christmas of 2020 is where things picked up again. Oakley spent Christmas with her grandparents. And after Christmas, Jamie Jo was shown a photo of Oakley from somebody who knew Oakley's grandmother. In that photo, Oakley looked like she had a black eye and scratches on her face. Oakley's grandma talked to the police and told them that she had dark circles under her eyes, pale skin, and that she did in fact have scratches or sores on her face. And when Andrew and Jordan heard that the grandmother made those statements, it caused some major family tension. After that, they were not on speaking terms or visiting terms with the grandmother. Jamie Jo waited to see if the grandparents would call DCYF as well, but they didn't. Jamie was very concerned about calling because she didn't want them to brush her off thinking it was just about getting Oakley back. She also wanted to see if anybody else would call to back up this story. But this was also around the time that Jamie had heard that Andrew was possibly fired from his new job at Murphy Veneer for potential drug use. Now, it's worth noting that both parents were now working. Jordan was working in the casinos and Andrew was doing that, but apparently lost his job. So after seeking the advice of people that she trusted, like a friend named Susan Schultz, who was the police chief in Elma, Jamie Jo made the decision to call DCYF. Susan told her that she couldn't do a welfare check being that Oakville was out of her jurisdiction, so she encouraged Jamie to call. This would be their best bet in making sure that Oakley was okay. But when Jamie called on January 26, 2021, as per usual, DCYF was extremely rude and dismissive. The intake person, Morgan Artis, told her that since she didn't specifically witness any of that herself, he didn't think that what she was telling him was accurate, and he actually threatened her that she could get in trouble for making false statements. Jamie assured him that as a teacher, she is a mandated reporter, and that she was extremely concerned for Oakley's well-being. Now, this really upsets me here because we're talking about a set of parents who didn't have their children for over 2 years, and a worried citizen calling in is the one being treated as if they are a liar. No wonder so many kids aren't properly taken care of, because there are people like that are working in the field of child safety. Nonetheless, DCYF did in fact open up a case, although I'm sure begrudgingly, and the caseworker went to go check on Oakley and her siblings on February 10th. Fast forward about a month and a half later, on March 24th, 2021, DCYF called Jamie Jo and asked if she had seen Oakley or the siblings. Jamie told them no, and obviously that she hadn't seen Oakley since the day she left their home and that she wasn't involved with their family. That same week, the case was closed without anybody seeing Oakley one last time in person. Things were quiet yet again for a few months, but 6 months later, on November 6th, 2021, Andrew Carlson called 911 right before 5 p.m. He called to report a fire that had taken place. He said that it was caused by a cigarette lighter, and his 4-year-old daughter Oakley lit the couch on fire while she was playing with it. He said that he was able to put the fire out, though, so he didn't need any help, but he just wanted to report the fire for insurance purposes. Jordan told people that Oakley started the fire and that it took 4 hours to get it under control. Now, first of all, where was the supervision of this 4-year-old? Second, if it took you 4 hours to put a fire out, you are an idiot for not calling for help sooner. And they said the reason they didn't was because they couldn't find their phones, which I don't really believe that. And third of all, most grown adults have a hard time using a cigarette lighter. It can get stuck. It's hard. So there is hardly a way a 4-year-old could do it, in my opinion. And lastly, those photos don't look like it was just a couch fire. To me, it looks like maybe they started this couch fire intentionally to distract from another fire, which was maybe caused by them being reckless. Now, at one point, it was believed that they had blown up their microwave with drugs, but in the photos, the microwave is sitting on top of the counter in perfect shape. And other sources, including the oldest son's dad, have basically said that the fire was not started by the microwave. But I also can't help but wonder, was this fire intentionally started for an insurance claim? Because remember, in that phone call to the police, Andrew says, "We don't need help, we already put the fire out, I just wanted to put it on record for the insurance." Otherwise, if it were a real fire and it was going for 4 hours and you couldn't put it out, clearly somebody would have been called and something would have happened, or the whole house would have been up in flames. Now, the photos of that house show that it was clearly unlivable, but they were still living there for a while. On November 10th, the principal of Oakville Elementary School, Jessica Swift, went by the house to drop off some supplies for the family since they had lost so much in that fire. Typically, Oakley would come running to see Jessica, but this time she didn't. Jessica asked where Oakley was, and Jordan told her that Oakley was in timeout in her room. Now, I'm just saying, I don't know any 4-year-old that would stay in their room in timeout if they heard somebody who they loved saying hi and came into their house. They would run out of their room regardless, unless they are like the most obedient kid ever, which if you have a child like that, please let me know your tips, because there is no way that my son would ever sit in his little timeout if he saw his aunt come over or his uncle or his grandma. He would be he'd hear their voice and would go running. But Oakley didn't come out of the room. On November 17th, a GoFundMe was created for the family by somebody named Anna Johnson. The Hiles saw this, and they were deeply concerned about the kids living in that sort of environment. And more importantly, Jamie Jo was concerned that they seemingly fought this fire for hours while leaving their kids in harm's way with a fire. So Jamie emailed Catherine and Angela once again. In that email, Jamie specifically said, "I am writing you to document that if something is to happen to those children, and I have tried multiple times to help them, that CPS and DCYF are at fault, and not only will be in huge legal trouble, but the public relations fallout of not protecting those children will be massive." But once again, Jamie was ignored, and they did not respond. So Jamie called Washington DCYF the very next day. Jessica Swift went back to the house on November 24th to drop off more supplies. During the 5 minutes that she was there, she did not see Oakley. A couple of days later, during a meeting with other teachers at the school, one of them said that multiple of them didn't have a good feeling about the things that were going on inside that home where Oakley was residing. Now, Jessica has a daughter that is close in age with Oakley's sister. So Jessica texted Jordan to set up a play date for the very next day, which was December 4th. They went swimming at an indoor facility, and afterwards, Oakley's sister wanted to go back to their house. Jessica let her, and when they got back to the house, they were all sitting on the couch. The little girl was saying that her baby brother, then 2, always followed her around. So Jessica asked if he did that with Oakley as well. Then she point blank told Jessica, "There is no Oakley." Jessica, very confused and taken aback by this, asked her to clarify, and then she physically curled into a little ball and began shaking. She stayed the night there, and the next morning told Jessica that Oakley was sent back to the Hiles because she was so bad. Now, by this point, Jessica knew that something was wrong, so she called the Grays Harbor County Sheriff. They confirmed that Oakley was not in the care of DCYF or the Hiles. So Jessica pulled an extremely smart move next, and she texted Jordan saying how much fun the girls were having and asked if they could stay another night together. The next morning, Jessica dropped the girls off at school before calling in a welfare check for Oakley. This was actually Oakley's 5th birthday. Surely, she should be celebrating it with her parents. They at this point were now living in an extended stay in Tumwater, Washington, after being told by insurance that they couldn't reside in the house in its present condition given the fire damage. At 10 a.m., Tumwater police were dispatched to check on Oakley. Jordan and Andrew did answer the door, but Andrew told police that Oakley had been staying with his parents in Oakville. Andrew somehow didn't know their phone number or address, though, which how in the world does someone not know the contact of their parents, let alone especially when their parent is allegedly with them in their custody? It makes no sense. Make it make sense. Regardless of Andrew trying to not give their information to police, police ended up making contact with them, and they said that they didn't have Oakley, and they hadn't seen her in close to a year. Jordan and Andrew told police that they hadn't seen her since November 30th. When officers spoke again with the couple, Andrew didn't seem surprised that Oakley wasn't with his grandparents, and upon being questioned, Jordan got really angry and went right back into the hotel room. Which, if you get angry about people caring about the welfare of your child, you are the problem. But because they didn't have any legal authority to do anything but start investigating, they left the hotel for the time being. There wasn't much more they could do. Andrew casually called Thurston County Police to then report Oakley as missing, saying that the last time he saw her was on November 30th. That afternoon, Jamie's phone kept ringing. She was at work, so she decided that she was just going to deal with it a bit later, and she kept letting it go on red. But she listened to a voicemail, and it was a message from DCYF asking if they could take in Oakley's brother, and also Oakley whenever she was located. Now, at first, Jamie wasn't too worried about the whereabouts of Oakley. She knew that Jordan and Andrew had tried to hide the kids before when they were being removed from the home. So she thought that maybe Oakley was with another biological family member, and she figured that once Oakley was found, she would be back with them soon. Jamie had actually just come out of a meeting with her boss where she was crying about missing Oakley too, since it was her birthday. He told her that he was sure that she would see her again. So when she got that call, she was so excited and ran down and told him immediately. She also immediately began prepping a birthday celebration for Oakley. That night, Oakley's brother came to their home, and their hearts became full again at the idea of having Oakley back with them. Law enforcement personnel started working on this case and trying to figure out when Oakley was last seen. And they were quickly able to figure out that the last time Oakley had credibly been seen was February 10th, when a CPS worker saw her on a visit. So police had started to search this property by this point, and it was 300 acres, so it was a big job, and they were worried that maybe Oakley had been lost in the woods. They were also looking at neighboring properties. While that was going on, investigators drafted a search warrant for the inside of the home, and forensic interviews took place that involved Oakley's 9-year-old brother and her 6-year-old sister. When the kids began speaking, it almost seemed as if they had just been waiting to have someone to open up to in regards to the things that had been going on in their home. Oakley's brother said that Jordan would often beat Oakley with a belt and lock her in a closet, possibly under the stairway. He expressed concern that Oakley was starving. Oakley's sister initially said she couldn't talk about Oakley per her mother, but eventually she broke down, expressing how much she misses her sister, and that it's been a long time since she had seen her. She said that Jordan told her that Oakley went into the woods and was eaten by wolves. When law enforcement got into the home, they found toys, clothing, and all sorts of items for their other 3 children, but nothing for Oakley. They also saw blood splatter on the blinds and on the door handle. There was also a handprint on the wall in the hallway. They took DNA samples, but the results are still pending. When investigators began questioning Jordan and Andrew again, Jordan immediately became uncooperative, and she was arrested for obstructing justice. By the evening, they both had been arrested on suspicion of first-degree manslaughter charges, and Andrew was also charged with obstruction of justice. Investigators also learned that after law enforcement left that hotel, instead of panicking about their missing daughter, Jordan and Andrew reset Jordan's phone. Now, unless you're hiding something, why would anyone ever factory reset their phone when their child is missing? They should want to have every photo and every piece of their child at their fingertips to help with the investigation. The search for Oakley continued, and the FBI became involved very quickly. The 2 younger kids, besides Oakley obviously, were placed in separate foster homes. Oakley's brother was placed with his biological father. The next morning was December 7th. And remember, the last credible sighting was from February. It was now December. So that's when Gray Harbor County Sheriff's Office posted on social media asking for the public's help in locating sweet little Oakley. That was also the day that they went to court on those manslaughter charges. And it was also the day that Jamie Jo received a call from her friend who was watching the court proceeding. That friend told her that they were charged with manslaughter and that they were being asked where Oakley was. Upon hearing the news of this, Jamie was at Target and immediately left and threw up all over the parking lot. It was truly a nightmare that she was living and could not wake up from. Oakley's sister's foster parents went to law enforcement to ask about her medication that they knew she needed that same day. The sister is legally blind and was diagnosed with failure to thrive at birth and needed human growth hormone injections. Upon further investigation, they realized that the prescription hadn't been filled in 15 months. Over a year, and no medication for this child who could be permanently physically impaired, which could lead to death. Like I said earlier, a parent's job is to take care of their children. No matter what, if your child needs a life-saving medication, you figure it out. I know I would do whatever I had to do to make sure my kids did not go without such important medication, and I probably shouldn't say it on here because I'm a true crime channel, but I would rob a pharmacy if I had to. I would do whatever I needed to do to make sure that they got what they needed. And don't come for me because I probably shouldn't have said that out loud, but whatever. Now, although this was such an unfortunate and angering thing, it did pave the way for law enforcement to officially charge the couple on December 9th with abandonment of a dependent person in the 2nd degree. They could only hold them on 72 hours on those suspicion of manslaughter charges. So the manslaughter charges were dropped at that point due to insufficient evidence. But they knew that the abandonment charges would allow them to keep searching for answers and collecting evidence. The sheriff's office and the FBI were still searching the property for Oakley. They were using all resources available to them, including aircrafts and divers. Then, 2 of the Carlson children were taken in for hair follicle testing on December 10th. It was known at this point that Andrew and Jordan had recently relapsed, although nobody knows how recent it had been. By December 13th, a week after Oakley's reported disappearance, it was announced that the search and the investigation at the house was completed, but that they were not giving up on finding Oakley. They also started immediately looking into the possibility of if Oakley was sold by her parents or not, but they weren't able to find any evidence of that happening. The public was outraged. Neighbors hadn't seen this little girl in a long time. She wasn't enrolled in school besides for a very short period of time, and while she was, it was solely virtual work. The only people who would know where she was and when she exactly was last seen would be her parents, Jordan and Andrew. On December 15th, Andrew's parents released a statement, and this statement said, "The Carlson family have been and continue to be fully cooperating with this investigation. Our only objective is to find our granddaughter Oakley. We're praying that Oakley will be found soon, and also for the multitude of good people working around the clock to make that happen. We ask that the media respect our privacy during this very difficult time, and we do not wish to make any further statement for now. Thank you." On December 30th, Jordan and Andrew went to court on the abandonment charges. The judge found probable cause and set their bonds at $150,000 each, and their arraignments were set for January 10th, 2022. Jordan's attorney, Michael Nagel, argued that the reason that this child had been without medication is because insurance refused to cover it. He said that Jordan spent a lot of time trying to get insurance to approve it, and it had been discussed in dependency court for months. He argued that she should be released on her personal recognizance. So again, she just gave up. She had enough money for drugs, but not enough money for her kid's medication. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. That same day, there was a protest of people outside of the jail chanting at Jordan and Andrew about Oakley's whereabouts. It was absolutely clear that the community was going to rally around this precious little girl and hopefully find her. On January 10th, Jordan and Andrew went back to court. They both pled not guilty, and they were set for trial for April 2022. On January 20th, the deputy prosecutor filed a motion to add 2 more counts to both Andrew and Jordan's charges. These 2 charges were endangerment with a controlled substance. Now, if you recall, the 2 kids got hair follicle tested back in December. Oakley's 6-year-old sister's follicle showed 5,186 pictograms of meth, and her 2-year-old brother's follicle showed 10,000 pictograms, which is actually the highest it can even read. So essentially, these children had tons of this drug in their bodies within the previous 3 months. There was credible information that the drug use may have started around July of 2021. Oakley's sister had enough in her body to show that she had been passively exposed to it. But the brother, on the other hand, had enough to show that he had ingested it. So on February 7th, they both pled not guilty, and trial was set for the same day as the abandonment charges. Now, I don't necessarily think they were dosing their children with this drug. Possibly. Who knows? I think it's more likely that these kids are young and they got into it somehow. The daughter passively ingesting it, maybe the son, because he's younger, thinking it's candy or thinking it's something. I don't know. But regardless, them pleading not guilty is extremely angering. How are you going to say you aren't guilty when your children literally tested positive and you were the only people that they were in the care of? On March 13th, 2022, Andrew changed his plea to guilty on the endangerment charges. He was sentenced on April 4th to 12 months in jail and was told he must have a chemical dependency evaluation within 45 days. Also that he could not have any firearms, no drug use, including Mary Jane, or THC without having a medical exemption, and also no unsupervised contact with any non-biological minor. The judge said that he could have unsupervised contact with his own children, but that was at the discretion of the dependency court. On April 6th of 2022, Jordan's attorney put in a motion for her to have phone visits with her kids, including Oakley. So this child has now been missing for who knows how long. She won't speak on where she might be, but somehow she expects to be able to talk to Oakley on the phone. It is absolutely appalling the levels that Jordan has gone to. Now, thankfully, the judge denied it. And to be honest, that was the best thing that the judge did. All of their kids are better off without them. Shortly after that, Jordan decided to plead guilty on the endangerment charges. And on April 22nd, she was officially sentenced to 20 months of jail time. Jamie Jo was front and center protesting during Jordan's sentencing. The difference in Jordan and Andrew's sentencing comes down to their previous histories. Andrew had never been arrested, while Jordan had a pretty lengthy history. So for the next few months, law enforcement continued searching for Oakley, but all with no luck. Andrew was released on August 3rd of 2022. And his release is angering because he literally put his children in extremely dangerous situations in which they could have died many times. He also refuses to speak about Oakley, but somehow he just gets to walk out as a free man, as if he has no care in the world on where his daughter might be. He is just a disgusting excuse of a human being. Thankfully, there were people there to let him know that on his release day. So much so that his attorney argued that the community isn't a safe place for him anymore. Hi, as if anybody cares. His home should have been a safe place for his children. Am I right? Why does he deserve to feel safe when his innocent 6-year-old hasn't been credibly seen for what's now coming up on 2 years? And here's what kills me. Andrew could have been kept in jail longer. The Attorney General, Bob Ferguson, denied a request for a writ of habeas corpus. That would have required him to produce the body in a set time or be held in jail on contempt of court, similar to Lori Vallow. And it blows my mind that this Attorney General didn't do what he could have done to help in the search for Oakley. Instead, he told everyone to stop contacting him and to go to the governor, who has also refused to talk to Jamie Joe and do what he can to help find Oakley. On September 12th of this past year, Andrew no-showed for his chemical dependency review hearing. Big surprise. When a bench warrant was issued, he showed up at the criminal hearing that afternoon via Zoom. He explained he was in sober living and got an extension for the following week. The next week, and he did show up via Zoom, but he still didn't have the paperwork. Yet again, in true Andrew fashion, he was given another chance. On the 26th, he did bring in the paperwork, showing that he completed treatment on August 31st, but he didn't show the treatment plan and evaluation, so they ordered him back in October, which he went and brought the paperwork to. One weird thing I saw was how similar Andrew looks compared to Chris Watts, both terrible fathers who clearly know exactly what happened to their children, in my opinion, and Chris is in jail for life, so I can only hope that happens to Andrew as well. Jordan was released on January 15th, 2023. So far, she seems to have lived her best, unfazed life, not worried about her missing children's life, and she was even on a prison dating app called Caged Ladies. Although her profile photo on there is definitely not how she looks now. But that best prison life she was living has now turned back into jail life. Just minutes after Jordan's release from prison, the Gray Harbor County Sheriff's Office took her back into custody. This time, she was charged with 3 counts of first-degree identity theft and 1 count of second-degree identity theft. According to a law website in the state of Washington, if a person uses somebody else's means of identification or financial information to obtain credit, money, goods, services, or anything else in value in excess of $1,500, that person has committed identity theft in the first degree. And second degree is when the value is less than $1,500. First degree identity theft carries up to a 10-year prison sentence and or a $20,000 fine. Second degree identity theft carries up to a 5-year sentence or a $10,000 fine. So Jordan is back in jail with a $25,000 bond on each charge. Hopefully they throw the book at her and she spends 30 plus years in prison. And to be honest, I hope she was absolutely caught off guard getting arrested again after thinking that she was going to be a free woman. I hope she was walking out being like, ooh, the fresh air. I'm going to be so free to be a horrible person and continue making bad decisions. Oh, nope, clink, 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 clink. Sorry, Jordan. Back to the cage for you. Now, I'm really sad it wasn't on charges for Oakley, but hopefully those are coming. Jamie Joe posted about the charges, and I know that for them, the longer that Jordan is in jail, the better. She doesn't deserve to ever be a free woman and carelessly just live her life. Currently, Jordan's oldest son is living with his biological dad. The youngest boy is with family, and at this point, all signs show that the middle sister is still in foster care. The Hiles made the decision to stop fostering Oakley's brother when they realized that Oakley was presumed dead. It was too hard to care for him while also grieving the loss of their daughter. Luckily, some biological family took him in, and so far he seems to be doing very well there. There are no plans for the children to be reunified at this time, and hopefully there won't be. Oakley's case is clear evidence that the system is broken, and that there are people working within it that should not be. There was an internal investigation done on DCYF which basically said they did nothing wrong, but everyone knows that they did everything wrong. Angela Fry's Oakley social worker has even been promoted to a supervisor since then. There are good social workers out there, and I truly hope and believe that most of them are in it for the right reasons. But in my opinion, Angela pretty much contributed to why Oakley has gone missing. She should not have been given a promotion. She should have been fired for what seems like ignoring clear signs of assault and neglect. Oakley should still be at home with her mom and dad, Jamie and Eric. She should be skipping down the kindergarten halls at school, playing with her friends at recess, going to dance classes, and keeping everyone on their toes and laughing. Instead, Nobody knows where this sweet little girl is, and the people working within the state of Washington seem to be doing everything they can to avoid an external investigation and being truly honest with the fact that they dropped the ball and Oakley could have been saved before she went missing. Now, my first question in this, too, is why wasn't Oakley in school? Why was she only in virtual and for a short time? From their track record, it didn't seem like they really loved spending time with their kids. The kids were left alone a lot. So if she wasn't doing in-person school, was she possibly being assaulted at home and had marks on her body that they didn't want to be seen? Or maybe they feared that she wouldn't keep quiet about what was going on inside the home? Maybe she knew too much about the drug use and they didn't want that getting out. I can't think of another reason why they wouldn't want to send her to an in-person school when that would have meant that they didn't have to deal with her all day and could just pawn her off on the teachers. Many people have, of course, asked, could Oakley have been sold for money, for drug money, for home money? Because living on a 300-acre property can't be cheap by any means, and drugs aren't cheap by any means. Well, some, I guess, depending. Could Oakley have maybe talked about wanting to go back to the Hiles and live with them, and maybe that upset Jordan and Andrew? After all, she did love them and she didn't want to leave them. She's a chatty kid, and I think it's possible that they got upset with her over something she said and maybe hurt her. Or could it have been that Oakley possibly ingested some of the drugs like her siblings? Only in her case, maybe a potential lethal dose. They were able to get follicle testings with the siblings, but obviously they couldn't do that for Oakley. It seems likely that they were deep in their addiction again, and so it seems likely that she could have gotten a hold of something if the others did. The possibilities really are endless on this one. Investigators are pretty much remaining tight-lipped on this as of now. I also think that maybe this case has been so hard because of Andrew previously working in law enforcement. I'm sure he saw investigations firsthand, and I'm sure he knows how they go and has maybe even figured out ways to evade getting in trouble, at least just for now, hopefully. Hopefully it all comes to the surface soon. Do you think it's also possible that he's friends with people in law enforcement and therefore they're being paid off to keep quiet? Something just isn't adding up here. Oakley has now been officially missing for over a year, and last known sighting almost 2 years ago. There is an $85,000 reward for anyone who can help find her. On the 1-year mark, which was also Oakley's 6th birthday, Jamie Jo went to a place called the Break Room with her friends to break things and get out some of the frustration.
Jamie, it's been a tough year getting a chance to speak to the foster parents of Oakley Carlson. They were here behind me. This business allows people to go in and break things like glass and tables. And what Carlson's foster mom tells me is this is exactly what she needed after the last year.
Tuesday is a hard day for Jamie Jo and Eric Hiles.
And as any mother, you go through those 5 stages of grief and anger and denial, and here we are a year later on not only her birthday, but the 1-year anniversary of her to be found missing.
The Hiles and all who have come to know and love Oakley are continuing to advocate on her behalf. This includes protesting at all of the court dates and even protesting outside of the county jail while Jordan and Andrew were locked up inside of there. It includes showing up to DCYF oversight meetings and calling out the inconsistency. It includes calling out government leaders for the things that they're ignoring. People in the town started a petition that amassed almost 7,000 signatures. This petition was for Oakley's Law, a law that would implement a 5-point safety net for children being reunified, as well as mandatory regular drug testing for the parents post-reunification. And most importantly, all of these efforts include never letting Oakley's name fade away, doing interviews when they can, speaking out about Oakley on social media in hopes that somebody somewhere knows something. Oakville Elementary School even had Jamie Jo and Eric up for what would have been Oakley's TK graduation last year. Things like that, knowing people aren't ever forgetting about their daughter, are I'm sure what keeps the Hiles going on some days. Now guys, we always say it, you know it on this channel. Our goal here is to always generate awareness so that it will not only lead to awareness, but hopefully will lead to a tip coming in, to a lead, to justice, accountability, to all of those things. So with Oakley's whereabouts still being unknown and her parents slipping in and out of addiction, here is what I am asking of you today. Take 1 second to share the link to this video on your social media. Share it in your group chat with your friends, share it in your family group chat, share it somewhere. Because my guess is that somebody out there knows something or has heard Andrew or Jordan in a drug-fueled fit say something that maybe now would ring a little bit different, that might be a little bit of a lead into something. And the more tips, the better, because tips can turn into leads that can turn into discovery and getting answers, which then we know brings justice and accountability hand in hand, usually, hopefully. So please share Oakley's story, because the more people who have eyes on this and know the players involved, because the more people who know what Oakley looks like, the players involved, that what happened, the story, the last timeline of the sightings, everything like that, the more likely different tips will be able to be pieced together and shared. So please, please share. And I want to know from you, do you think that this was something intentional at the hands of Jordan and Andrew, and a frustration that they had with Oakley, and that they are behind this, which is now a suspected murder by many people? Or do you believe that maybe something accidental happened? What do you believe and why? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you have other information about this case or any details that I forgot or that I have left out in this video, please let me know them in the comments. And in the meantime, please continue to keep all of Oakley's family, friends, Jamie, Joe, and Eric in your thoughts and prayers. I can't imagine the gaping hole in their hearts through this whole process. It is unimaginable to think about. So please continue to keep them in your thoughts and prayers. Okay, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. I will continue to keep you updated as we hear more about Oakley's case. All right, until the next one, stay safe.